Thanks so much for joining us on our Arise Church YouTube channel. We exist so that you can experience God, and we hope you do experience His presence and His power through this message. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to us on Instagram at My Arise Church and find us on YouTube at the same handle, My Arise Church.
How you guys doing? Woo! Man, you guys are awake, alive. You are using that extra hour of sleep last night. I see it. Yes. Super excited to be with you. Also, welcome to everybody watching online as well as our Rice Falkenberg location. Love you guys. Put your hands together for all of them. Yep. Man, if you're new to our church, my name is Brent. I get the privilege of being your lead pastor, and we're going to continue to experience God together today over the next few moments. We always want to celebrate as we get started, and we have a fun celebration today because I don't know if you noticed that our youth pastor turned into an anime character with his blonde hair, and you're like, what is going on? That's just weird. Well, there's a purpose behind it. I guess a couple weeks ago, he told the youth that if they had 260 students, not leaders and such, but just students alone, 260 students in youth, that he would dye his hair blonde. To which last week they had 259 students. 259. And he was so gracious, he dyed his hair blonde anyway, and that's why we have an anime character as our youth pastor right now at this location. So love that, love that, love that. God's doing some awesome things in our youth ministry. It continues to grow. In fact, I love the fact that many of the challenges that we have at Arise are around growth, and it's like the challenges we have are the ones other churches pray for sometimes. And by the way, that's just our youth at this location. That's not even considering our youth at our Riverview location at all either. So with that being said, also, we started dripping this to you last week for the Follow Me campaign and challenging you to follow me to make a difference, meaning not me, but Jesus calling you to follow him. Like I said, a lot of our challenges here are related to growth. And so we have room in our Saturday morning service and we have room in our Riverview services. But in this service especially, we oftentimes are out of room. Now, there's a little room in here today, but there's not a ton. And so we're just encouraging you as you see fit, as the Holy Spirit is leading you and guiding you, that you would actually take a step of faith. And if the Lord is leading you to actually step into our Saturday service, it meets Saturday morning at 10 a.m., or our Riverview service that meets at 9 and 11, same times as here. And I promise you this, that any seats that you give up in here, when you step into those other locations, somebody will fill those seats who experience God in a powerful way. And as part of that initiative, as part of what we're trying to accomplish with this, they're giving away hoodies. There's been some confusion on whether it's next week or this week, but I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to say it's this week because I'm going to give them away this week. And it's the hoodie that I'm wearing right now. It's this hoodie right here. Yep, looks good, right? It's pretty sweet. Yeah, pretty cool. I should have made my wife come up here and model it because she's wearing one as well. And they are free to anybody who's making that switch from a Sunday to a Saturday or Sunday to Riverview. They are going to be free for you. If you're like, I want one of those, you can't get them anywhere. Maybe somewhere afterwards we put them in the Arise store or something, I don't know. But at this moment, there's the only way you can get them is by going to another service time here at Arise. And just so there's clarity, last week I might have said it a little stronger, and we want you here at Arise. We are not kicking you out of Arise. We're just saying sometimes the Lord's going to ask you to take what might feel sacrificial step in your relationship with him. He'll do that kind of thing. And for some of you, not all of you, but for some of you, the Holy Spirit's going to be nudging you to consider going to the Saturday service or our Riverview location services. And by the way, those services are awesome. Pastor Josh is an amazing communicator. Desiree leads worship on Saturday. She's amazing. In Riverview, Pastor Kieran is the bomb, and Erica often leads worship over there. They got it kicking in both those places. And if you're like, man, I just don't like how big the church is, like Saturday morning especially is much smaller. And I mean, there's still enough people here, like God moves and it's good, but it's not nearly as big a crowd as Sunday mornings. And so if you don't like the traffic getting in and, and the parking and the seating, like consider Saturday or Riverview. Amen? You with me? All right, good. Because now we got to get past the initial family talk to actually get into a message. I'm thankful right now that it's football season. Come on. This is the best season of the entire year. When it's not football season, I sit around and wait for football season to show up. And in football season, you get college football and pro football. I'm probably a little bit bigger of a college fan than pro, but I love my pro sports too. I love the Bucks, but I love college teams. One of the reasons I love college football is because you have such a enormous amount of energy in the stadium with the bands and so many more players, people in the stands. There's so much energy if you've ever gone to a big-time college football game. How many of you are Gator fans? Thank God there's not many of you. How many of you are Hurricane fans? We didn't even acknowledge you. How many of you are USF Bull fans? Come on. Yeah? All of our Chi Alpha students, some USF folks, good. USF is the only team in Florida doing well right now. Like they're it, right? Any Florida State fans? Yeah, good. God's team, yes. Excited for that. When you get in college, sometimes you have literally some of the big stadiums will have well over 100,000 people inside the stadium, all screaming, yelling at the other team, cursing them, whatever's going on, but they're crazy. And some of the really big, historic colleges, literally people drive in on like Thursdays with their RVs and stay Thursday, all day Friday until the game on Saturday, half the time getting drunk the entire time, waiting for the Saturday's football game so they can just go ballistic inside that stadium. And so the energy level and the excitement around college football with that kind of environment is just crazy. And so it creates what would be called a home field advantage. You're familiar with this, like in betting, they would give a 3-point differential just for being on the home field, which is kind of weird because being on the home field, it's the same size field that you have all the way from high school and Little League all the way through your life. The field doesn't change. The only thing that changes is not the rules, it's actually the surroundings. But when you get inside of the surroundings of an opposing team, all of a sudden it's harder to play well than it is inside of your own stadium. In your stadium, everybody's telling you how great you are, but in the opposing stadium, it's a little bit different. So now in the pros, like in college, you got Texas A&M is famous as the home for the 12th man. You got 11 players on the team, the fans make the 12th man, and they can actually affect the game. But in the pros, you get the black hole for the Raiders, right? Y'all know the black hole? The Cleveland Browns have the dog pound for them, right? The Green Bay Packers have the cheeseheads, which is not intimidating at all. If you're a Packer fan, I love you, but that's not scary. The Buffalo Bills have those people that just simply take their shirts off in the snow, and you're like, what kind of kamikaze white people stuff is this? I'm just saying, this is weird. And the Philadelphia Eagles are really, really a crazy bunch. They booed Santa Claus. Their fans are famous for being obnoxious. And they once booed a Frisbee catching dog who didn't catch the Frisbee at halftime. And the moment you leave your locker room inside of that environment, you end up inside of a whole nother environment where everybody's jeering you, they're yelling at you, they hate you, they don't even know you, but they hate you because you stand for the opposing team. And when you're in that environment, it can be really complicated, it can be really hard to play well, it's hard to function, it's hard to think. All of a sudden you can't hear the coaches, all of your planning can sometimes go out the window. What? Can you even hear me? In fact, Jesus said that you will be hated by everyone because of me. And sometimes you can walk out of this room into that stadium and it gets really, really complicated. Are y'all with me? I mean, have you ever had, like I played football, and when you play football, the coach does this thing right here, right? The coach gets a chalkboard or marker board, whatever, and he's got the chalk, and he's got X's and O's, and the O is gonna block the X, and gonna push the X this way, and he's like, all right, Carrie, this is your job right here. You're gonna hit this guy, you're gonna move him this way, so the running back can go right here, and you can follow behind him right here, and you're the X and hit that O, and then on the chalkboard, the coach is blocking everybody. No problem, it's easy. And then you get on the field, and that guy you're supposed to block is 6'5" and 250 pounds and runs a 4.5 40. And his nickname is Bone Crusher. And it's like, okay, on the chalkboard, you made that look really easy, but then I get out in the real world, and it's like not quite that. Have you ever had the moment with the pastor in the church setting like this is the locker room, and like in this setting, and the pastor's like, this is how we're gonna reach this community. This is how you do evangelism. You're gonna pray for people, pain or problems equal prayer, right? We're gonna have these moments. This is how we're gonna do this strategy right here. You're gonna start a Bible study at work. You're gonna lead people at work to Jesus. You're gonna be the apostolic leader that starts something new in the community. You're gonna feed the poor and clothe the naked. And you're gonna do these things, and it looks really good on paper and on the chalkboard. And then you walk out there, and you're pumped up because we're gonna do this. And then you're like, this is a lot harder than I thought it was gonna be. It looks really good on paper. Looks really good on the chalkboard, but it's a lot harder than I thought it was gonna be. Can I just say this? That's not a bad thing. Great Christians are forged during the fires of hard times. That's just true. We are literally forged and formed not in the good times. You're actually formed in the hard times, and you need them, which is why James would tell us famously, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, my friends, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. You actually need the testing of your faith. Just like with any great athlete, it's not just in the home stadium that they need to do well, but the real iconic, the real great ones are the ones that can walk into opposing stadiums where everybody's yelling at them, cursing them, saying ugly things about them, and they can walk into that type of environment and actually perform well. Well, what if I told you that we live in that kind of environment in the world today? And there's actually a biblical character that I think is pretty stinking amazing that I think paints the picture for where we are today. Go to that, it might be right behind this. Is that right? Yeah. We're starting this series called Forged in Fire today, which, by the way, is also an awesome TV show. Come on, you like the TV show, right? Like, Forged in Fire is the male version of like reality television. Except for sports, which is the ultimate reality television. Men are like, reality television is so stupid, who's dating who's? And then I found Forged in Fire. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of legit. This is like men pounding metal and making knives in a competition. And the first time I watched it, I was sick, and I watched it for like 6 hours straight. And I'm like, this show's awesome. Anyway, I believe that you and I as Christians need to be forged in fire. That it's not just in the good times that you're developed, it's actually in the hard times that determines who you really are. And there's this biblical people that we're gonna look at for the next few weeks that we see in the the book of Daniel. And you're gonna know them as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These three exiles to Babylon. The year is 605 BC. Israel has already been divided into two different nations. The top nation, the northern nation, is called Israel. The bottom nation is called Judah. Israel tended to be more evil than Judah, and therefore their nation collapsed earlier. It collapsed first. But in 605 BC, the nation of Judah is still hanging on by a thread. And Nebuchadnezzar, the leader of this incredible Babylonian empire, comes in, surrounds Jerusalem as the last great hiatus for these Jewish people. He surrounds them and starts stopping food from coming in, water from coming in. And I'm going to get to it in a minute. It's the worst time in Israel's entire history. It's ugly. It's catastrophic what's going on. So he's going to take that group over. And Nebuchadnezzar was a really smart man in some regards. And what he would do, his practice was, he would take on exiles and train the smartest, the brightest, the good-lookingest, whatever. You know, if it's Carrie Kammick and Angie Kammick gets in this room, it's maybe Pastor Johnny, I don't know. It's right? He would take the best and the brightest, the smartest, the ones who looked like they could really be used, and he would take them and then nurture them and brainwash them and teach them how to be Babylonian. So that then when he needs to run that territory that he took over, he can send people back to be the governors, the officials, the leaders, the leaders of that land. Because they're gonna understand the people's ways in that land, and now they're gonna understand the Babylonian ways, and they're gonna be better at leading. It's actually pretty genius, okay? So that's how Nebuchadnezzar would do things. And so in 605, when he finally takes Jerusalem, he then takes on exiles, the best and the brightest. And right off the bat in Daniel chapter 1, right off the bat, we have the story of them going into exile and the first great crisis that they're gonna hit as now they are stepping into this place of exile. My amazing, beautiful wife is gonna read that for us. We're gonna read Daniel 1, 3 through 15.
Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, "I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food.
Amen. Amen. If you're taking notes, your first note would be simply this: that your decision to follow Jesus is going to be forged in fire. I know we love to talk about how following Jesus, like everything's going to be better all the time, and it seems to be easy in a lot of regards. But it's easy as long as we are in the locker room or the home stadium. But the second you walk out of this stadium, so to speak, into the world, you're going to find hecklers and people that are against you and people that are very loud. And sometimes it'll even be just the busyness of life, and you can't hear anything over the fact that you got to deal with your kids, and you got to deal with work, and you got to deal with this thing and your spouse, and all of a sudden you're trying to plan for vacation and retirement, and you're trying to do all these many things. And in the middle of that, you're reminded, oh, pastor said we're supposed to do this. And it ends up getting drowned out by the noise of life. When these Babylonian exiles go into exile, these young men, when they go into exile, you should know some things. This was the hardest and worst time in the history of Israel. In fact, it got so bad during this time in Israel, during this moment, that it said that they even considered, and possibly did, that they were actually eating some of their children because they were starving to death. I know that's disgusting, but that's the Bible. It was an atrocious time. There was not just a famine, but it was a forced famine where there was no water, there was nothing to eat, and they were literally starving to death. Now, in that time period, the way people would frequently think, especially other nations, not necessarily Israel, but the other nations, the mindset of the nation was, if my nation defeats your nation, that means my God defeated your God. Therefore, my God is the stronger God of the two. Therefore, when the Babylonians destroyed Judah, the Babylonian gods are God. The Judah gods are not. You have that influence, that culture that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have been very familiar with. They're going to walk in from a Jerusalem that we can go to now, and it's beautiful and it's lush and all of this, but it was not the Jerusalem of that time period. It was dark, it was dirty, it was disgusting. It was a literal hell on earth to be there amidst the captivity. And now they're going to walk out of this into a Babylon with the hanging gardens of Babylon. That's literally one of the wonders of the ancient world. They're going to walk into a place with grand buildings and unbelievable temples, much bigger and grander than some of the temples that they had seen. All of this is going to be right there in front of them. All of a sudden, they have all the food in the world right there in front of them, treated like royalty, going from starving to death to have everything that you could possibly want. And the faith of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but we're focusing on Daniel this morning, is going to be forged and tried and tested amongst the extreme conditions of Babylon. Because now, this young man is stepping out of the comfort zone of his home stadium into a place where they don't know his God, don't care about his God, and they believe that their God already defeated his God. So what do? They start to teach him a new literature and a new language. Well, they got to get him to speak the language. You got to speak Chaldean. That would be the language of the Babylonians. Because if you're going to fit in, if you're going to work for us, if you're going to be a leader for us in this way, you have to be able to speak the language. Nothing makes you stand out faster than not speaking the language. Some of you have heard this before. I've told this story. I love this story. But many years ago, I was on a missions trip to Mexico, and we had been giving away grocery bags full of food to impoverished people. And when it was all over, when that ministry was done, there was maybe 5 or 10 grocery bags of food left over. And so the missionary we were working with said, hey, we can't keep it. Just go out in the streets and find somebody to give it away to. Just go, if you see somebody, that, just give it away. And so we walked out, and I was walking with a guy by the name of Bob. Bob's with the Lord now. He was an older man back then, but now he's with the Lord. And I'm walking with Bob, and Bob walks up to this Mexican lady who obviously speaks Spanish. And Bob was one of those people that not only does he not speak Spanish, but he speaks his own language sometime. And Bob walks up to her and hands her the bag and says, "Ole," which is Bob's way of saying hola. Ole. This poor Mexican lady has no idea what he's saying. You can see it all over her face. This mom, she had a stroller. And so she just looks back at him and says, "Ole." She just responds, I was laughing so hard. Nothing makes you stand out faster than not being able to speak the language. Therefore, you need to speak the language. You need to know how to fit in with the Chaldean culture, the Babylonian culture. You gotta fit in, Daniel. You gotta blend in. On top of that, you gotta learn about our literature, which most of that would have been all about the gods of the Babylonians. You need to understand our history and our role, just like you Jews have a role with your God. We have a role with our gods, and you need to now learn all about those gods. And then they were appointed portions of food from the king's table, these royal delicacies of Babylon. You go from poor and starving and having nothing, and you are literally starving to death, to now you are being given the greatest food ever with all kinds of cakes and beef brisket and chicken and barbecue and beef O'Brady's wings and that cheese sauce at Olive Garden and the rolls at the bread at Olive Garden and Longhorn and all, like it was all there. Like if you think it's good, it was all there. And you take these boys who are starving to death, and now you're giving them everything they could possibly want to eat from the king's table. But do you realize culturally from the king's table meant that all of these foods you're eating would have been sacrificed to idols? At least all the meats would have been sacrificed to idols. That's where the king's table food came from in some regards. And so it would have been sacrificed to idols. So what do these boys do? I gotta learn a new literature. I gotta learn a new language. Now I'm gonna be eating this food that I have issues with because a good Jewish boy is not gonna eat the food that's been sacrificed to idols. On top of this, they were given new names. They were given new identities. You will no longer be this. From now on, you will be this. So Daniel, beautiful Hebrew name, meant God is judge. They changed his name to Belshazzar. Bel will protect. One of the gods in the Chaldean culture. Hananiah, God is gracious. Beautiful Hebrew name. They changed it to Shadrach, inspired by Aku. Aku is the moon god, the god of the moon. Azariah means God is my help. They're going to change it to Abednego, servant of Nebo. Again, one of the gods. Mishael, who is like God, and they're going to change it to Meshach, who is like Aku. Literally changing their names and their identity to reflect that's not who you are anymore. That's who you used to be. And they find themselves in this culture that envelops them and is all around them. It's like gravity. It's like the air you breathe, that every time you move, it is there. You can't see it, but it's there. And now you're expected to blend right in and just be Babylonian. You know, there's a term that gets used. I didn't invent it, and Christians did not invent it. But there's a term for our modern world that gets used sometime that you'll hear from time to time that says, we are a digital Babylon. A digital Babylon. I don't know, maybe you've heard that before, maybe you haven't. But we live in this world right now that looks a lot like Babylon. And I would even say the culture of America in general is post-Christian in most ways, to the degree that the same, or at least similar things to what they're experiencing in Babylon are the same things we would experience. That you have new identities. You used to be boy or girl. But now you have a whole lot of other ones. You have new literature teaching you new things. Yeah, God did not create everything, everything just simply evolved all by itself without any creator or any God whatsoever, which, by the way, means you have no purpose whatsoever because there can be no ultimate purpose. And then we wonder why people are so depressed and so full of anxiety and feeling so worthless when we've told them that you are worthless for a long time. You're nothing more than an evolved primate. We live in this world where the culture is telling us certain things, and why would you believe this antiquated book, this Bible? There's something you should do now. You should trust the science. Just get rid of the Bible. And in a very real sense, we live in this world where the culture all around us is trying to form us into the image of a digital Babylon or a secular humanistic worldview and show us things that are just reshape our minds to things that are not biblical. Essentially, to brainwash us away from Christianity so that you can perfectly fit in with the American culture. So, everybody lives together before they get married now. Why would anybody get married and then live together? Don't you want to test drive the car before you buy it? As if your spouse is a Honda? Right, this is the cultural norm that's around us. Well, it's fine to go to the club with your boss or to go to this bar with your boss because that's what you have to do to get ahead. In some cultures, it's fine to sleep with your boss because that's what you have to do to get ahead. In some cultures, it's good to use this kind of language or not use this kind of language, but it's a system that's forming you into an image of an American culture, and it's all around us. It's okay to fudge the numbers on your taxes. Who cares? It's okay to not pay those bills. That's why bankruptcy exists. I know somebody that told me one time, God bless them, but this is not a Christian, thankfully. But they literally just stopped paying for their house back in 2017, 18, whatever, 2007, I should have said, back when the first financial big crisis hit with the housing market, and they had plenty of money to pay for their house. They just said, I would rather not pay for my house, keep the money, get the hit on my credit score, which everybody's going to get, so what's the big deal? And then I can actually use the cash that I'm saving to pay cash or put a lot more towards another house one day. Why? Because it makes sense on paper, but it's ethically wrong. Right? We live in this world where all this stuff is so sort of normalized that if we're not careful as Christians, we just kind of participate in it. What's the big deal about porn as long as it doesn't I'm not like every day. Well, my wife watches it with me. I've heard that. I'm just saying. What? And if we're not careful, we've come out of this world because we've been conditioned to another. And what we can talk about in this room, as soon as you go out, they're going to try to brainwash you into believing something completely different. But Daniel, in the middle of this, which is crazy, y'all. I hope you can get this. This is nuts. These boys had nothing. According to the norm of the day, their God failed. They had nothing. Their God failed. There was no reason to stay firm with their God. But Daniel refused to be brainwashed. In fact, we're gonna come back to this a number of times. The word that gets used right there, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. He resolved not to defile himself with the royal. Have you resolved yet that you're just not going to be like everybody else? Have you resolved yet that the world may live this way, but I'm not going to live that way? Have you resolved yet that there's a wide road and a narrow road, and I'm going to find myself on the narrow road? I'm not like everybody else. Have you resolved that I'm not going to do the things that the world tells me to do? I'm going to do the things God tells me to do. Have you resolved that yet? Have you resolved that yet? Because it has to be a moment of resolution, of resolve inside of us that goes, I'm okay not being like everybody else. And sometimes that stinks because that meat smells good. And that food from the king's table smells good. But Daniel says, you know what? It may smell good, but I'm going to have the very first Daniel fast. And he starts to form new patterns. The fire will forge new discipleship patterns. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of their mind. There is a pattern of this world that loves to form you into its image. And if left to yourself, you will naturally be formed to its image. Therefore, you have to deliberately create new patterns, renewing your mind in the Word of God daily and strategically, renewing your mind. So Daniel says, you know what? I'm going to fast. Now, I know we love this story to some degree. Some of you heard this story many times. But what you didn't get is the smell in the story. What you didn't get is how good that beef brisket smelled when everybody was eating the beef brisket, but Daniel said no. That's what you don't get. And when they walked out with this giant pig with the apple sticking out the snout and walking in, and it smelled so good, and everybody's drinking it, and everybody's drinking the wine from the king's table, and everybody's merry and happy, and Daniel's over here with his plate of salad. Oh, this is so good. Can I just be real with you? Because we love to preach this story, and it makes it out like Daniel's just, like he never was tempted, but come on for a second. Have you smelled cooked meat? That's what heaven smells like, the sacrifices, aromas. Yes. Sorry if you're a vegan. But we resolve. We resolve. The place of resolution, the resolve that has to happen in us, watch this, it won't usually happen out there. It'll happen in here because we resolve to create these patterns and disciplines in our life. Daniel had a number of them. The first one's going to be fasting, right? So the very first Daniel fast, many of you have heard of a Daniel fast, is done right here. Later on, we're going to find that Daniel was a person of prayer. It's going to come up in another week in this. And so Daniel has these discipleship patterns that he apparently was already learning before he stepped into this world of the Babylonians. And you know, you can't create disciplines when you need the discipline. You have to create disciplines before you need them. You can't get in a fight and learn karate. Right? You have to learn how to fast before you actually needed to fast. You have to learn how to pray before you are in the moment that you got to cry out to God and you have to pray. You got to learn how to read your Bible before you have the moment that you need to be able to share a word with somebody from the Bible. You have to have the discipline in order for the moment to happen. You can't walk out in the enemy stadium on their football field and think you're suddenly going to play good if you never practiced behind the scenes. It's the practice, the discipline, the patterns that you put in behind the scenes that allow you to turn out the focus of the opposing team and actually do what you're supposed to be doing. There's a great Admiral, William McRaven, who used to lead and do a lot with the Navy SEALs years ago. And many of the Navy SEALs would wash out, you know, especially what they would call Hell Week, that week where they literally torture them. They're screaming at them the whole time. They get no sleep. They're putting them through the worst environments you can think of. And these poor recruits are just like ready to ring the bell and get out. I'm sure you're familiar with that to some degree. And so everybody's yelling at him. It's very much an opposing team, and you got to determine whether you're going to go through it or not. And when he would speak to recruits, he was famous for saying a line like this. He would say that you must decide not to quit before you ever arrive at SEAL training. If you wait for the pain to decide for you, you've already lost. You can't wait till the moment that you need to be able to quote the Bible to start reading the Bible. You can't wait till the moment that you need the power of God to work through you to fast and seek the Lord in that moment. You got to be a lifestyle of discipline. Have you resolved yet that you're just going to have a disciplined lifestyle? Because if you wait till the heat of the moment to decide what to do, you will fail every single time. Why? Because those patterns, those disciplines that you put inside your life, first you form them, it is your job, but then they start to form you. And if you want to be formed into the image of Christ, if you want to renew your mind to be like Christ and not form to the pattern of the world, you and I have to create patterns of ourselves, patterns for ourselves, I should say, of reading the Word and spending time with God and creating these patterns. Otherwise, when you go into the culture and you go to work and you go into the school system and you go into this world, you will naturally drift into a version of Christianity that's not Christianity. You'll go right into good old boy Christianity, right? We're in the South, right? We read the good book. We know the man upstairs, right? We go drinking on Saturday night and go to church on Sunday morning, right? This version of Christianity that some of us are involved in that's not actually Christian. It just makes us feel a little better about ourselves, right? So I read the book, good book, talk to the man upstairs. I'm a good old boy, right? I don't even know if I should say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Or we end up with a version of Christianity that looks very political. And your Christianity is not really based on the Bible. It's based on a political party's view. It's a very wide road. It's not the narrow road that he's called us to. So the fires are going to forge us with new resolve and conviction. Because when you find yourself inside the fire, you will have to determine who you are, what you're going to do. And you can go this way or that way, but you can't go down the middle. You can't go down the middle. And these fires will forge new resolve and new convictions. Convictions. Look at your neighbor and say convictions. I didn't say opinions. I said convictions. All of us have opinions. What's the old joke? Opinions are like butts. Everybody has one and everybody else thinks everybody else's stinks. Opinions are not, they're not life-changing. They shift. Convictions will hold you through the hard times, which is what Daniel's resolving to create right here. He's creating conviction in his life. I will not do this. Whatever comes, I will not do this. I got opinions. I think Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player to ever live. I was in a meeting this morning. Carrie's trying to fight for King James over here, and LeBron's like, come on, man, get out of here with all that. Okay. Here's the thing. That's my opinion. I ain't going to die for that. You put a gun to my head and say LeBron James is the best basketball player, I'd be like, yeah, King James. I'm King James only, right? I'm not going to die for that. It's an opinion. But I also have convictions that Jesus died on the cross for my sins and rose from the dead 3 days later. And you know what? I'll die for that. You put a gun to my head, I will die for that. It's a conviction, not an opinion. And the problem is the church is very opinionated and not very convicted. So in this moment, I gotta begin to wrap up because I've been talking for a while now. So in this moment, what'll happen is you'll have all of the outside influence. You're in the opposing stadium. Everybody's yelling at you. Everybody's telling you, you stink. You're no good at this. What are you doing? What is this stupid thing you're reading called the Bible? Why do you pray? You know prayer doesn't actually work. Why are you doing this thing? You're fasting? You are not eating? What is wrong? Like, that is weird. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And I just want to tell you, don't quit. Don't quit. Don't quit. Why? Because, as Paul would write to Timothy, if we endure, we will also reign with him. And if we disown him, he will also disown us. Jesus would say, you will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm till the end will be saved. Look at your neighbor and say, stand firm till the end. Stand firm till the end. Don't you back up. Don't you quit. Don't you walk back and hide. You actually are called to stand firm, to be different, to stand out. Whew. A few years ago, I had a theme for our church that I dropped in January. You still see the shirts running around every once in a while. And the theme was that we are an extremophile. And most of us have never even heard the word extremophile before I brought it up. An extremophile is an organism that thrives amidst extreme circumstances, like places where things are freezing cold, like literally freezing cold, or extremely hot. And yet you will find these organisms that are still living. And I'm telling you, you were created to thrive amidst the worst conditions that have ever been. When the hardship comes, if you will put God first, you can actually thrive. If you don't believe me, let's keep reading in Daniel. Daniel 1:15 to 20. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the other young men who ate at the food table, at the royal table. So the guard took away their choice food and wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. That's a hard verse to read. Like, God will call you to hard things. Don't make this overly easy. These 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief officials presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in the whole kingdom. 10 times better. 10 times better. I'm just telling you, to quote Forrest Frank, God's way is better. God's way is better. God's way is better. I didn't say it's easier, but it's better. And in the long run, when it's all said and done, you might have not climbed up the corporate ladder near as fast as this person, but you know what? The employees aren't going to hate you like they hated that person. It might not seem better in the moment. I know you wanted to live together because you wanted to have sex before you got married, but you did it God's way. And here you are 30 years in a marriage, and the other people are 5 years already divorced because God's way is better. It might be harder, but it's better. I resolved not to defile myself. I resolved to be different. Persecution is not a bad thing in many regards. It actually tells us who we are. Walking out into this culture actually helps us go, am I really going to follow Jesus? Or am I going to partially follow Jesus? Because partially following Jesus is not really following Jesus. There's an old quote I've used for many years. I've said it many times in our church because I believe it's so true. But the church popular is the church polluted, and the polluted church is a puny church. The church persecuted is the church pure, and the pure church is a powerful church. You want to see the most powerful churches in the world, go to the places where there's the greatest persecution. And you'll find the most powerful churches in the world because they know what they believe. There's an old story. It's said to be true that in East Berlin, East Germany, 1970s, before the Berlin Wall came down, when communists had a strong foothold there, there was a Christian group that was huddling in private, in secret. They knew they would be in trouble if they got caught. Persecution was very heavy against the Christians at the time. And this small group of Christians, 15, 20 Christians are gathered together. And the story goes that they actually started to read the book of Daniel because they understood that Daniel was in a hostile culture. And they thought maybe we could learn something from Daniel by also being in this hostile culture. And so they started studying the book of Daniel together. And one day while they were studying the book of Daniel together, 2 guards came in with their guns and caught them studying the Bible. And when the guards came in, they started shouting and yelling at them. And what are you idiots doing? What are you fools doing trying to follow this Jesus? Who do you think you are? You guys are all going to jail. You're all going to be persecuted. You are all going. And they said, we're going to have grace on some of you though. If you are a cancer, if you just leave right now, we'll let you go. But everyone who stays, you are the ones that I'm taking to jail. You are the ones that are going to experience this persecution. And so some of those people left and some of those people stayed. And the story goes, and it's based on a true story, that after the last person walked out of the room, the guards put down their guns and said, okay, now we can have church because we have the actual church here. Yeah. There's a wide road and there's a narrow road. And some of us try to create a path where we're trying to walk on 2 different roads at once. Will we resolve not to defile ourselves? Because I'm telling you, in the end, you're 10 times better. You're 10 times better for it. In fact, Daniel created a generational legacy. Like in multiple levels, Daniel created a generational legacy that all started with these words, Daniel resolved not to defile himself. It all started right there, and watch this. Over 2,000 years later, we still have Daniel fasts. Why? It started because Daniel resolved not to defile himself. You're still talking about the fast that Daniel did, imitating the fast that Daniel did over 2,000 years later. That's crazy. That's generational. But if that one doesn't get you, how about this one? The moment that Daniel decides not to defile himself, he starts this promotion that allows him to go 10 times higher. He starts what would have been at that time period a school of learning, a school of education. It's believed that's part of what he would have run there. And so about 600 years after the time of Daniel comes the Christmas story, what we're about to celebrate in another month or so. The Christmas story happens. And in the Christmas story, there's this weird character that you put around your little nativity at your house that, if you're honest, kind of doesn't make sense. At least not until somebody explains it to you. And they're called the Magi or the wise men. By the way, Magi is magician. Daniel was 10 times better than all the magicians. The Magi who come from the east. That's all we know about it. They just come from the east. who are these magi who suddenly appear on the scene and at some point in Jesus' childhood come bearing gold, frankincense, and myrrh because they're following a star? What? That's just weird. Where do these characters show? Where do they come from? You know what theologians and scholars believe? That Daniel, as a leader inside of Babylon, starts a school that's studying messianic prophecy and looking forward to this Jesus who's one day going to show up, and looking forward to this Messiah. And he does it so well that after Daniel dies, another generation follows that, and then another generation follows that, and then another one. And 600 years later, they're still watching for a star in heaven. And they see this star that apparently Daniel had prophesied and looked at through the messianic prophecies. And they follow that star all the way to find this baby Jesus, this young Jesus. And I don't know, in the theater of my mind, in this moment, it works like this, because this is probably the moment where like Mary just had a baby and she ain't feeling it right now. And she's being mean to Joseph because she ain't feeling it right now, and there ain't no drugs yet. And Joseph is like, God, if you are God, like, could you like give us a sign or something? Like, God, if this is really you doing all this, because this is kind of whack. We ain't even got a place to stay right now. And ain't like I'm trying to do my best as a father, and this ain't even working out. And in the middle of whatever's going on in their life, all of a sudden comes knocking at the door. Yeah, you don't know us, but we just came from hundreds of miles away in the east in a whole other empire, but we've been following a star. And we are about to give you enough gold, frankincense, and myrrh that you can go start your business from here on out. That you ain't got to worry about what you're eating today. That you ain't got to, I'm about to make you sort of rich. Y'all with me? And Joseph's like, okay, God, I see you. I see you. And Mary's like, all right, I get it. That started with Daniel in Babylon. As a scared, probably early 20s young man in a culture that made no sense to him, who said, I will not defile myself. Watch this. Resolve is not about the moment. Resolve is about the generations who will inherit what you stood for. Resolve is not about the moment. Resolve is about the generations who are going to inherit what you choose to stand for. What if what you stand for is actually affecting your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids in a way that you can't even see it yet? Maybe one day they're going to be doing an Ada fast. I don't know. Stand up with me around the room. Father, I pray around this room that the conviction of the Holy Spirit would rest on us so that we could then have convictions from the Holy Spirit. That in the middle of a culture that is antagonistic to Christianity, in the middle of a culture who wants a watered down version of Christianity, in the middle of a culture that wants a TikTok version or an Instagram version, but you are calling us to be different, to stand on the Word of God, empowered by the Spirit of God, to be bold. Lord, I pray that we would be those who are walking on a narrow road, not the wide road. I pray that we would be those with such love for you that is demonstrated in the love we have for one another. I pray that we would be those like Peter and James and John and the disciples who, when Jesus looked at them and said, are you going to leave me too? And they said, where else can we go? You speak the words of life. God, I pray that our commitment to you does not change based on the environment we are in. But we would be people of conviction, that like Daniel, we would resolve not to defile ourselves in this world. The temptation is real. The gravitational force of the culture is real. but we will be people that create the patterns in our life to renew our minds so that we are formed in the image of Christ, not the image of our culture. Help us to be different. Lord, I pray that you speak individually to each one of us and show us the areas of our life where we formed a little bit more to this world than we have to Christ. And as you speak, I pray that we would be people that would resolve to fix this pattern in our life and create the new pattern that you want us to have. As Samuel would pray, speak, your servant is listening.
God is doing so much here at Arise Church, and we want you to be a part of it. Stay connected with us on our YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram, and wherever you can find us online at My Arise Church, and we'll see you next week.